Welcome, everyone. Good to have you with us. I'm Dan McDermott, your host of Google Plus Week. Big news today. The FBI reported that they have officially traced the Sony hack to North Korea, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, an ironic name. And President Obama gave his year-end news conference to discuss this. So we're going to go right to that, and then we'll have a chat with our panel, including Oleg Moskalinsky in Washington State. Welcome, Oleg.
Hello, everybody. Happy holidays. Thank you, Dan.
With his two children, who obviously strongly take after their mother.
Correct.
And we have Mr. Michael Ellis, who has some kind of crazy delay going on. It's like 10 seconds. It was like the 1980s, early satellite technology. And we have Duke Carrico.
I am behind the times.
Literally and figuratively. We also have Duke Carrico joining us. Welcome, Duke.
Hey, glad to be here. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Duke looks and sounds good. All right, here we go. Let's go to it was a funny and jovial President Obama today, but he was pretty serious about Sony and North Korea. Let's look at that, and we'll be right back.
Thank you, Mr. President. Start on North Korea, because that seems to be the biggest topic today. What does a proportional response look like to the Sony hack? And did Sony make the right decision in pulling the movie, or does that set a dangerous precedent when faced with this kind of situation?
Well, let me address the second question first. Sony's a corporation. It suffered significant damage. There were threats against its employees. I am sympathetic to the concerns that they faced. Having said all that, yes, I think they made a mistake. In this interconnected digital world, there are going to be opportunities for hackers to engage in cyber assaults, both in the private sector and the public sector. Now, our first order of business is making sure that we do everything to harden sites and prevent those kinds of attacks from taking place. When I came into office, I stood up a cybersecurity interagency team to look at everything that we could do at the government level to prevent these kinds of attacks. We've been coordinating with the private sector, but a lot more needs to be done. We're not even close to where we need to be. And one of the things in the new year that I hope Congress is prepared to work with us on is strong cyber security laws that allow for information sharing across private sector platforms as well as the public sector, so that we are incorporating best practices and preventing these attacks from happening in the first place. But even as we get better, the hackers are going to get better too. Some of them are going to be state actors. Some of them are going to be non-state actors. All of them are going to be sophisticated, and many of them can do some damage. We cannot have a society in which some dictator someplace can start imposing censorship here in the United States. Because if somebody is able to intimidate folks out of releasing a satirical movie, imagine what they start doing when they see a documentary that they don't like, or news reports that they don't like. Or even worse, imagine if producers and distributors and others start engaging in self-censorship because they don't want to offend the sensibilities of somebody whose sensibilities probably need to be offended. So, you know, that's not who we are. That's not what America's about.
Okay, so we saw the president there. He's was critical of Sony. Now, to put this to be fair here, when right after this, Fareed Zakaria interviewed the CEO of Sony, and the CEO of Sony obviously was aware of what the president just said because they delayed, I guess, their interview, or it was scheduled for right after this. So he said that it wasn't a case of him not reaching out or he had not talked to President Obama, and he is an Obama supporter and helped him, I guess, donated money to his campaign. So he said he was disappointed because he said that the way this is being characterized in the media is unfair, because what happened was that Sony made the movie, and that one by one the theater chains said they weren't going to show the movie, and then they said that they are still actively looking for a video on demand or some sort of way to release the movie. And so they have not backed down, he said. They are still resilient. And in a statement after that, they said that they very much want everybody who wants to see the movie to be able to see the movie. And then after that, President Obama was interviewed for the Sunday program with Candy Crowley on CNN. CNN's kind of owned this story today. But they interviewed President Obama again and asked him about the Sony guy's comment, and he said they should have talked to me directly, and that he would have been willing to personally reach out to theater owners to try to get them to show the movie. This is a complicated issue. What is your initial take on this, Duke Carrico? What do you think?
Well, I think it's still early. First of all, if nothing else, this is a lot of hype, and it could be hype in Sony's favor. You know, I fully expect, you know, the Netflix could be an outlet. I believe we're going to see this movie before it's over with. Okay. I personally, I was a little bit disappointed that Sony pulled it, but we're going to see this movie. It might not be Christmas Day, but we're going to see this movie soon.
Let me go to Oleg, and then I'll go to Michael Ellis. So, Michael, I think you're like 2 minutes delay there, so this is your warning.
By the time I finish, he'll be able to say. Exactly.
Oleg, what are your thoughts, your initial opinion on this whole deal?
I think my initial opinion is that whatever his name is, the ill character in Korea, got together with the Sony CEO, and they tried to figure out how can they make this movie most successful. And they knew that releasing it as it was would probably not generate any money at all. It's probably one of those horrible movies that we never want to see. So they decided to orchestrate this little scenario, like there's a hack going on, and then they got Obama in the mix. And next thing you know, we got all the conspiracy theorists now can come out. And essentially, when they do release it finally on Netflix, like Duke said, it's going to be a huge success. You know, it's probably going to overshadow even the season 3 of House of Cards. And basically, I think that's exactly what's happening. Obama shouldn't have played into the deal, but maybe, you know, he's part of the people who's getting the cut from the movie proceeds. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, I mean, it's one of these deals where I can understand Sony being, you know, kind of hypersensitive because it's a serious threat, no question about that. And at the same time, I can understand Obama being concerned about the consequences because it's a precedent. You know, the fact that they pulled the movie, it's a precedent where now any nut out there can actually threaten a movie company because they don't like the tone of whatever the movie is coming out is, and now everybody and their brother would be threatening these movie companies and expecting it to be pulled out because they made the threat. It's no different than if you look at when people create bomb scares. You know, somebody makes a phone call saying there's a bomb on an airplane or somewhere else. Next thing you know, everybody goes into the bomb mode, even though there's nothing there, just because somebody made a phone call. And it's one of these situations where it's a similar deal here. So I think, in terms of whether we'll see it or not, I mean, what I said earlier, the part that I said that I did mean, it probably is a pretty crappy movie. I mean, I don't expect it to be anything serious, and it's just because of this controversy is the only reason that it's getting the airplay it's getting, and Obama getting involved, obviously for obvious reasons. So, I agree with Duke. I think we will get to see it at some point in time, whether we want to see it or not. It's a different question, and it'll be, we know that North Korea has a lot of threats in their pocket that they constantly dish out in our direction, and most of these are empty threats because of the obvious reasons. And so we'll see how it plays out. To me, it's a non-event, but everybody's talking about it like it is some kind of event.
Okay, let's go to Michael Ellis, who's in, I think, what did he say, Illinois or some crazy place? You can hear his audio coming back to me.
Indiana. Greatest state in the union, by the way.
So what do you think about this?
So I'm in pretty much agreement with what Oleg said, except for the cabal that he suggested might be in place between President Obama and Kim Jong-un, I believe is his name. Not that I think President Obama is above being in a cabal with a communist leader. I just don't think it's the leader from North Korea. So that's, but I do think Oleg, you're exactly right about the movie being a smash hit now that it's been hyped this way, in this particular way, because I would never have gone to see this movie, and now I will absolutely make an effort to see it now. I hope it comes on Netflix because I already have Netflix. If it's on Hulu Plus, I might have to buy a subscription for a month.
Okay, awesome. And just so folks know, there is a serious delay with Michael Ellis on the receiving end. So basically, it's like the early satellite days. What I got to do, because it's like 5 or 10 seconds before he can hear me. So we just sort of throw it to him, wait, and then let him go. And when he pauses long enough to know he's done, then we take it away from him. Kevin Bryan also joins us, and what are your thoughts on this, Kevin? This hacking, and the president said that. Well, what's your initial take, and then we'll get into the deeper stuff.
Well, my initial first of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. When my initial take on this whole thing was that at first I was really sorry about how this hack was affecting Sony, but then once I heard that Sony was going to go ahead and just pull the movie altogether, I wasn't that sorry. I really think that this was an opportunity for them to really express their First Amendment rights and just show the movie anyway. And they don't necessarily have to show it in a movie theater, but they basically heard a threat from across the world, and then they decided to back away. And that's not very useful for the filmmakers or for Sony in general, because now it means that anybody who feels like throwing a threat their way, however real or imagined it might be, it'll not only shut down the release, but it'll shut down other things as well. Because there was another movie that was supposed to be worked on recently. I think it was Steve Carell. He was supposed to be in another movie that was had a bit of a controversial topic, and that one got shelved completely. It never even got. It's now not getting made, and this is the result of backing down from threats like this. You have a movie that should have been able to withstand at least the criticism, and they just decided it was not worth anything to them. And so I don't know how sorry I should feel for Sony right now. Maybe it's good that they got hacked, because now we see exactly what Sony is. They're just looking out exclusively for their bottom line. There's no issue with them about stopping any movie from coming out. So I'm not that sorry. That's my initial thought.
Okay, so let's address that issue. And what the Sony guy said today, the CEO, Linton, I think is his name, what he said was, they absolutely intended to release the movie. They still intend to somehow get the movie out there. I think it's still on their Facebook page. I saw the trailer advertised on YouTube or on whatever TV channel, whatever it was, as recently as like yesterday or the day before, and that it was only when the theater chains said we're not going to show this that they canceled the premiere because the theater wouldn't show the movie. So it's not them, he's saying, and they still intend to show it. But if they can get a video on demand major player like Amazon Prime or Netflix or Hulu or whoever to agree to do it, maybe Redbox on DVD. And so I get that. I'm sure he wishes he had talked to the president to have a conversation with him directly before the president sort of, I don't want to say threw him under the bus. And I think that the president, a U.S. company has just been attacked. Thousands of computers were rendered useless. And as the president said, a dictator just censored a U.S. company. So that's a big problem. But to put on the other side of the coin, I saw an interview with Mark Cuban, who is one of, I think, 2 or 3 people who own Landmark Cinemas. And he said, the interview was yesterday, and he said he had spoken the previous night with the other 2 principals, and they just said, it's not worth the risk. We're not going to run this movie because, their obligation is to, obviously to shareholders, but it's first and foremost to their staff and to the customers for safety. And if you have, I don't know how many hundreds of theaters Landmark has, or thousands maybe, but I got to tell you, while the president's job was to be jingoistic and saber rattling against a foreign country that screwed with the U.S. subsidiary of the entertainment, Sony Pictures Entertainment, he said what he had to say. But at the same time, I understand if I owned 300 or 400 movie theaters, I would have pulled the movie. I'm not going to risk 500 people being killed by either a North Korean direct threat or by some copycat guy, right? We've seen that happen. And frankly, as a movie theater owner, it's not my fight. This is a fight between Sony and North Korea, right? So that's my view. I think all this, they're cowards to not show it, I think that's misplaced. It sucks. It's awful, but that's the deal. So, Duke, go ahead. What would you do? Let me ask each of you guys in turn here. Duke, what are your thoughts on that in general? But if you own 300 or 400, you're the CEO of Cinemark or Landmark or you name it. What do? Do you run this?
You know what? I think I would. I think I would run it. First of all, if my government can tell me that this threat came from North Korea, hacking a computer in Los Angeles is one thing, but being able to carry out a terrorist attack, I'm sorry, I don't think they're quite. North Korea is organized outside of North Korea. I believe if I was in charge of the theaters, I believe I would have run it.
Okay, Oleg, what do you think?
I think, to some degree, on the one hand, you can't just have anybody pick up the phone and call Obama and, talk to him. But at the same time, somebody of the stature of Sony, it's a big corporation and stuff, and under these circumstances, I think would have been totally prudent for them to reach out to at least the administration. Maybe they wouldn't talk to the president himself, but at least to administration with the FBI and see, kind of talk to them to see what their recommendations would be, and then make the call based on that. So I think if he did reach out at first to FBI and to the White House, I think my guess is the president would have been involved, and he would have told them exactly what he told them in press conference, that no, don't back up, release the movie, and we're not, basically take a tough stand, which is what it should be. So I think the CEO probably made a little bit of a mistake. I'm not saying the guy should have been closed for it, but at the same time, he's trying to do, like Michael was saying, to try to make sure that people don't get harmed because of the release of the movie. So it's understandable on both sides, but I think if I was running Sony, I would have reached out to FBI based on the threat, and the White House, considering it's kind of a, that kind of serious implication. and then if they say go ahead and run it, they run it. Yeah.
That's funny. That so far Duke is hardcore run it, uh, no matter what happens, and Oleg, who's like, was born and raised in the Ukraine, is kind of a badass, right? He's the one who's actually got a sober opinion on this. Kevin, what do you think about this? If you owned 500 movie theaters, you're the CEO. Would you have pulled this movie or not, Kevin?
I would air it. It's a really straightforward one. I would air it.
What would you say if at one of your 400 movie theaters there was an explosion and they're on CNN, they're pulling bodies out because maybe a copycat guy or maybe some agent or whatever did it? And as Duke said, I mean, the odds of an agent being employed to come to the U.S., because unlike radical Islam with these lone wolf guys, there really isn't anyone who supports the Kim administration and the North Korean government if they don't have to. It's not like a religious thing. It's kind of, you can argue it kind of is, but it's not like there's homegrown people who are going to suddenly like North Korea. That's insane. And the only people who have done that and ran in there are in fact mentally ill. But what do you say? What would you say if you were literally warned? You got a message from hackers saying that we're going to blow up your theater, 9/11 style attacks, and then you run it, and then something does happen, and it could be a copycat guy just trying to get on TV. What would you say at that point?
Well, I mean, I would definitely want to reach out to the families that were affected, but it wouldn't affect me running the movie. That's it. It would be an absolutist for me. I would just show it. What would stop me from showing the movie if there was a credible threat that there was some physical presence in America? There would have to. That's what would have to be the red flag for me. For them to just say in North Korea that we're going to do something, that's not credible to me. What's credible to me is if there was an actual local threat that I felt was there. And also, what I would add is, I do see what you're saying in that you want to protect people, but things like that could happen anyway. A mass murder could happen really at any time, and in this case, it happened because of a threat. But that it can also happen anyway.
Kevin, okay, let me put this into perspective.
Okay.
A nation state that has nuclear weapons, that is run by an insane person. The FBI has said they're behind this hacker group, or that the hackers are actually working for them directly, whatever. They have specifically said, I'm going to blow up your theaters, Kevin, if you run this movie. And you're saying like, oh, it could happen anyway. Asteroid could hit me in the head. I'm saying, can't you understand why these theaters would say, this is not my fight, this is not worth the risk?
I can understand why some theaters would do it. That's just not me. I would run it. I would run it anyway.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
You ever had a bomb threat called in to a local theater?
I agree.
I've had a bomb threat called into a school and they emptied the school, right? Every time.
And that
knowing that there's a 0.01% chance that the moron kid on the phone actually has a bomb, but they empty the thing out, right? For liability reasons.
Yeah, but it's a little different, though. That's a little different. I think what's interesting also in this particular case is this, that if they blow up even one theater, that basically essentially is North Korea starting war with the U.S.
Right.
So the question becomes, over release of the movie, are they that stupid? I mean, people who actually managed to build a nuclear bomb, are they that dumb that they're going to go into nuclear war potentially over a stupid movie? I just can't believe that they would go for it.
Oleg has a very good point there. Basically, you're saying that North Korea is going to pull a Red Dawn,
Right.
and then do that
Also-
over a movie. That's what really you're trying to assume that's going to happen. They're just going to turn the entire U.S. into a team of Wolverines, and we're all just going to have to fight back against North Korea over a movie. That's what you think is really going to happen. And I don't buy that this leader is insane. I do not buy that Kim Jong-un is insane. I believe that he has absolute power, but I don't believe that he's insane. There are other world leaders that I believe are truly have a few screws loose. The late Gaddafi had some real problems mentally. But I don't think that he's crazy. And that's why I don't think this is a credible physical threat. I think they just want to, psych us out from and have us censor ourselves, and I think they've succeeded.
Okay, let's go to Michael Ellis on this, and then I want to talk about prevention. What do you think, Michael? Would you show
It's
the
also
movie if you owned a bunch of theaters?
okay.
If you're the CEO of Landmark, you have
Thanks,
500
Dan.
theaters,
It's
whatever. What would you do?
also sure. I would show the movie for the same reasoning that Kevin used. I would absolutely show the movie, and I think I would do some things very specifically to engage my communities in each of the places where I have theaters, in all the cities where I have theaters. I would engage my own marketing department to reach out with press releases to all the newspapers and radio stations in my community to encourage people to be brave and take up the fight on the behalf of America's interests and attend the movie. Not because it's great for me for my bank balance, even though it probably would be, but because this absolutely is my fight. It's my fight if I'm a theater owner to be able to continue to run whatever freedom of expression I wish to have on my screens. It is my fight, just like everybody felt after September 11. They brought the fight to our shores, which is what Kim Jong-un just threatened to do. We cannot back down from these threats, no matter where they come from, no matter how serious they are. Now, as Kevin said, if there's a credible confirmed threat against a particular theater, then perhaps a theater should be closed. But otherwise, no way. We should be playing the movie.
Okay, so that's a new tack there. Maybe have a disclaimer.
Also, one more point. Can I make one more point, Dan?
Sure,
please?
sure.
Also, I wanted to say that it's also interesting to look at the situation. Like in our case, if somebody does something negative, we can do sanctions. We can do all kinds of things economically to punish other people. Like, for example, what's going on in Russia with their attempts to take over Ukraine and everything else. You can see that the U.S. can make some sanctions, right, to be able to create punitive situation for them. North Korea has nothing like this they can do. So the only thing that they have really they could actually do is threaten like they did and try to do this hack attack. I mean, they cannot put sanctions. They cannot do anything like this that we normally do. So the only thing they can do is just kind of bark like this, and that's what they did. So that also needs to be considered, I think.
I mean, essentially, if North Korea dropped a bomb and blew up a theater in the U.S.
Hey, real quick,
based
let
off
me
of a
interrupt
movie-
you, Kevin. Oleg, do me a favor and mute when you're not talking, because we're getting a lot of echo back from you keep popping up on the screen. We're getting echo. I'm not sure, because you're using headphones. I'm not sure why. That's weird. But go ahead, Kevin. I'm sorry.
Basically, if North Korea really did blow up a theater in the U.S. based off of this movie, it would be the last thing they ever did. That's essentially what would happen.
That's easier said than done, because here's the deal. Oleg, can you mute your mic, please?
I'm trying.
Okay. I tried. I couldn't even mute you here. But no offense if I mute you. It's just because we're getting an echo. But Kevin, before you proceed, let me let you know that North Korea could destroy 40% of South Korea in 20 minutes with conventional weapons without a single troop crossing the border. That's why we can't just quote-unquote take them out. So go ahead.
No, I mean,
And the U.S. has a treaty obligation that requires us to defend South Korea.
right. I mean, it still would be the last thing they did. It still would, if they really blew up something here. They would figure some stuff out. I think they have a plan about the deal with between attacking North Korea attacking South Korea. I really do, because this isn't the first time that they've realized that this problem is going on. I would bet any amount of money that they have some countermeasures there that would really be a surprise to North Korea.
And just a couple comments here before we proceed. Sai says Sony should release it on demand for free to internet providers to IPs inside North Korea. There's actually a group that is considering is I guess fundraising or whatever to drop DVD copies of the movie over North Korea. And I think we're going to talk about how we should respond in a moment. But
It'd be like this, what is it? The North Korea airlift, like the Berlin airlift.
yeah, maybe, but punishing them with the Seth Rogen movie. I'm
Well, I
kidding.
mean-
I mean, it looks fun. Let me get through these other two other comments here. Size other comment. So if the movie had been about assassinating Osama bin Laden, I know a few years too late, a U.S. threat will be tangible, and therefore you wouldn't show the movie? Question mark. And then George Cozy. There you go. That's his illustrated response. I guess now we're going to be blown up ourselves. But yeah, I'm just saying that if I'm the CEO of a movie chain and I've got to make a call here, while I support the First Amendment, I'm a newspaper publisher. I obviously am a big First Amendment guy. For example, almost never delete comments on my posts. I don't think I've blocked but like 2 people, etc. I'm for the First Amendment. Even if you're an idiot, I think you should be able to speak. But if I owned 500 movie theaters and I got a serious email threat from this group representing an insane regime that has nuclear weapons and is a nation state, right? This is not 3 guys in a basement tweeting. This is a nation that has done provocative things in the past. I can totally I say that. I mean, maybe now I might change my tune and say, you know what? I'm just going to put a big disclaimer on there and say we're going to show this in the interest of the First Amendment, and understand that we've received this credible threat, to be fully transparent, and there's a potential that the theater will be blown up. But in the meantime, it's $10, and would you like popcorn with or without butter? So maybe that'll happen. Let's get to what can we do. What's the smartest tack?
Good for you, Dan. That's exactly the right response.
Make sure to sell that butter. Make sure to sell that popcorn.
Or excuse me, butter flavored food product. No cows were injured in the production of this butter, quote unquote butter. So here's the question: what's the response? I think if we could do something propaganda-wise to expose the fearless leader, or whatever the hell he's called, supreme leader, I forget what his dad and he have different names. If they could not drop the movie, because the U.S. military should not be in the business of dropping movies, and really, but the president said there will be a response, and it will be a method and time and place of our choosing, etc. That, the typical, like I said, President Obama, whoever is at that podium as president, has to say the right things in a case like this. A U.S. business has been attacked. Tremendous damage was done to them, and also, this is not just leaked emails. I mean, in this case it is, but there was another report Friday in Germany about a steel plant that was hacked, and they took over the burner room, or whatever you call it, where they melt the steel, and they were unable to shut down the that furnace or whatever it was, and it destroyed the steel plant. And of course, the first famous example I can think of was the Stuxnet virus that was used to disable scores of centrifuges in Iran. So this is not, and this is one of the president's points. Today it's a satirical movie by Seth Rogen and James Flacco, as he said, James Franco, of course. But this is a serious thing, and news broke today that North Korea had taken over or disabled a nuclear plant in South Korea, and said that if they don't stop operating it, that they're going to destroy the plant. So these hacks are getting really crazy. So what is the response, Duke? What should we do? We can't bomb them. we can't take him out because, like I said, he could destroy almost half of South Korea in 20 minutes with conventional weapons without a single troop leaving the border. So you can't just take the guy out. We don't know where he is. He's in a different place every night probably. What do you do? You're POTUS. What do you do, Duke?
Impose sanctions, Dan. No, well, that was very sarcastic. Honestly, I don't know. I will have to say, you guys help me understand this. I understand that Sony Pictures is pretty much an American company, but it's still owned by a Japanese company, correct? Doesn't Sony in Japan still control Sony in America?
Yes and no. Yes, Sony controls. This is Sony Pictures Entertainment, which was originally TriStar, and I think around '87, Coca-Cola sold it, and then a couple years later, Sony bought a majority share and then did a friendly takeover, and so Sony Pictures Entertainment is the U.S. entertainment subsidiary, and there are others in other countries. It is owned by Sony proper, which was founded in Japan, but also has investors from around the world. You could own Sony stock, right? So is Coca-Cola a U.S. company? Yes and no, right? A bunch of Mexicans own interest in Coca-Cola Mexico. So it is and it isn't.
Well, I was just trying to figure out through that just what role our government might play in it, because this it's bigger than something that happened in the United States. If the corporation, the mother corporation is in Japan, I would think. So I think that whatever's going to happen might come from more than our FBI. And to be honest with you, I think at the end of the day, what Obama's going to do is probably sue North Korea, which means that nothing's never going to happen anyway.
Well, nothing will happen anyway because as far as sanctions, North Korea, there are other countries. I was watching CNN today, and there are other countries that have worse sanctions. Someone said they're not the most sanctioned country out there, like Zimbabwe, I think has more severe sanctions, and there are things we could do to prevent any company that deals in U.S. dollars from selling them things, that sort of thing. But they still, there's a clip of Kim Jong-un in a computer lab, and the computer monitors were Acer. So they still get stuff, from the Western world. We could do some sort of PR thing where we, drop leaflets or what have you. I don't know what you can do. You can't really blow them off the face of the earth. There's, a bunch of there's millions of innocent people around this guy. So it's easier said than done dealing with this. Oleg, how would you respond to this? Oh, Oleg, you're still muted. I apologize. Go ahead and start over.
Nukem.
Nukem.
No, it's one of these deals that, it's not really worth any kind of, like you said, I agree with you that Obama needed to say what he needed to say, not because he's going to do anything about it, but just to sound presidential and American and so on and so forth. But I don't think they're going to do anything about it. It would be nice if our hackers did something of similar nature to them to basically show them to stay back, or this is what's going to happen. That would be a good response in my view.
And some of your buddies from your home country have some game in that area, right?
Exactly.
That would be an appropriate proportional response.
Yeah, exactly. Just basically do it, and it would be, I think, a lot more devastating to them than some movie not coming out.
I know you're not a big fan of Vladimir Putin, but
no.
He just the Kremlin just confirmed that they have invited Kim Jong-un to come on May 9th for the anniversary of the defeat of the Nazi regime in World War II. And this is interesting because one of the reasons for this is that the Russia wants to run a pipeline to South Korea through North Korea, and so and what the Koreans want is the veto if the UN takes action against North Korea. Russia has a permanent veto in the Security Council, so that's a very awkward situation that could very well lead to Russia backing or preventing any kind of UN action for this or for
Yeah,
anything
no, I agree.
else.
I agree. You know, I mean, they're going to do whatever they can do to be anti-U.S. I mean, that's the Russian policy. It was like that when I was there. From what I'm hearing, it's still very much alive right now. You have Russia having 80% approval rating for Putin. 80%, despite the ruble tanking completely. Economy is in super shambles because of this. People trying to figure out what to do. I mean, basically they have, I mean, it's a complete economic collapse on many levels, and yet people still blame U.S. for this happening. They don't blame him; they blame the U.S. So you know, this is what you're dealing with.
All right, final thoughts on this. And the ruble is interesting. There are lines to buy TVs and stuff. Apple just suspended sales of their products. I think another company, I forget which one, did the same thing because the rubles had fallen so much. I think it was worth, 1 ruble was worth 1.5 U.S. cents, and then the next day it was worth 2 cents. But it's way down.
Yeah, it's
And
way down.
so
And you know, the fact that they don't sell Apple stuff is actually a good thing for them.
Touche. Okay, so Kevin and then Michael after that. So there's your warning, Michael. Kevin, what are your thoughts on this? And I'll be right back.
In terms of response, if we're talking about Sony, then they need to show the movie before it gets fully leaked. It's already partially leaked. They've already leaked the part of the movie where Kim Jong-il gets killed. That death scene is already out, and everyone can see it if they want to. They need to just release it before the whole thing gets leaked somehow. And also, if it's Sony, figure out some kind of video-on-demand release that they could do. If you're talking about what Obama should do politically, or the president should do politically, they need to first have a proportional cyber response from U.S. hackers to North Korea, like Michael was saying, and also you would need to have a serious conversation with China, because China is supporting North Korea politically, and they also have the biggest stake in anything bad happening to North Korea. Because if North Korea falls apart, then China's going to have millions of refugees swarming over the border. So you have to have a really serious conversation, behind the scenes with China, and see what kind of adjustments can be made to send them to re-education camp.
Absolutely. Michael Ellis joining us from Pyongyang.
Plus, China is the most likely advocate for North Korea. Yes, by satellite only to the distant and remote country of Indiana. It seems that China has got to be a player at the table discussing what the response is, but I think the cyber response is the most appropriate one. It would be great and wonderful irony if our hackers could hack the North Korean hackers' systems and retrieve the movie and release it. But I have no idea if that's actually possible. Or even if we could do a propaganda campaign that allowed us to pretend that that's what happened. I think that would be a very appropriate response. And then, of course, the Netflix or Hulu Plus or Amazon Prime or all of them, maybe get them all to agree to do it and make it free for a month with everybody that signs up or something. I don't know. Make it some very wonderful capitalistic success story that comes out of the fact that we retrieved the movie.
Yeah, they've got to put it out soon, because already part of it leaked out. It's going to leak out.
Yeah, I'm going to do a spoiler here. I'm going to tell you how he dies. So if you're not interested in this, then mute the audio, and when I'm done with the spoiler, then I will do this, and then it's safe to put the audio back up. So here's what happens. They do an interview with Kim Jong-un. They don't actually assassinate him the way you think. They do an interview with him, and it's embarrassing. It's on national television. It embarrasses him in front of the country, so he gets pissed off, and so then he decides to kill them. So they have this battle, whatever, and they escape in a tank, and then he's in Kim Jong Un is in a helicopter, and Seth Rogen and James Franco are in a tank, and then they decide they in the comedic way they suddenly realize, hey, we have they're shooting at them, they realize, hey, we're in a tank. There's a big gun on the tank, right? So then they shoot the helicopter, and then his face blows off and his head explodes. So that's how he gets it. So now that's the spoiler. If you never get to see the movie, at least you'll know how he got it. And so now I'm going to tell you. Now we're not going to talk about the any spoilers in the movie. So yes, it has leaked, or so I've heard. All right. Anyway, so anything else on this, and then we'll get to Cuba. Okay. Awesome. So huge news about Cuba. President Obama addressed the nation and discussed this. What happened, the timeline is this, and I want to say that I will be, a quick programming note, on the Virginia Talk Radio Network, I'll be discussing Sony and Cuba beginning at 10:50 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7:50 a.m. Pacific Time, and then after CBS, I'm going to talk about Sony first, and then, actually I can't remember which one I'm talking about first, but I'm talking about Sony and or Cuba at 10:50 a.m., 7:50 a.m. Pacific, and then after CBS News, I'm talking about the other one. So that's going to happen tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, the 20th of December, and you can find that either at VirginiaTalkRadioNetwork.com or I think they're one of the big stations is WIQORadio.com, and I'll post those clips.
Alternatively, you can hop on a plane, fly to Virginia, and catch it there.
Absolutely. So, in the spring, President Obama traveled to Italy and went to the Vatican to have an audience with the Pope. At that meeting, they discussed Cuba. And the president asked the Pope, and they discussed this case of Alan Gross, who was a U.S. contractor who basically went to Cuba and was, in fact, fomenting democracy and stuff. And the Cubans didn't like that. And so they arrested him. He'd been in prison for some time. And so also Cuba wanted to get back 3 members of what's called the Cuban Five, which are part of 5 people who were sort of spies for Cuba. And what they were trying to do was get information on Americans who were activists against the Fidel Castro regime. And there was also a guy in Cuba who was a Cuban who was working for us, the United States, and he was providing this information. He was a spy, and one of the topics that he gave us information on led to the capture of the Cuban Five. So the deal was we would release the 3 remaining Cuban Five guys. Cuba would release the agent who has not been identified who helped capture the Cuban Five guys, and they released 53 or 50-some Cuban prisoners who were sort of democracy advocate, political activists, what have you, political prisoners. So that happened, and then the administration said that the release of Alan Gross was a humanitarian gesture on the part of Cuba and not related to the prisoner swap of quote-unquote intelligence assets. May or may not be true, I have no idea. Not really a big deal anyway. So that happened, and then the president went on television, and simultaneously, just a couple minutes after he started speaking, President Raul Castro of Cuba went on television. So let's take a look at what President Obama said the other day about the administration's decision to reestablish full normal diplomatic relations with the island of Cuba, just 90 miles south of our shore.
Proudly, the United States has supported democracy and human rights in Cuba through these 5 decades. We've done so primarily through policies that aim to isolate the island, preventing the most basic travel and commerce that Americans can enjoy anyplace else. And though this policy has been rooted in the best of intentions, no other nation joins us in imposing these sanctions. and it has had little effect beyond providing the Cuban government with a rationale for restrictions on its people. Today, Cuba is still governed by the Castros and the Communist Party that came to power half a century ago. Neither the American nor Cuban people are well served by a rigid policy that's rooted in events that took place before most of us were born. Consider that for more than 35 years we've had relations with China, a far larger country also governed by a Communist Party. Nearly 2 decades ago, we reestablished relations with Vietnam, where we fought a war that claimed more Americans than any Cold War confrontation. That's why, when I came into office, I promised to re-examine our Cuba policy. As a start, we lifted restrictions for Cuban Americans to travel and send remittances to their families in Cuba. These changes, once controversial, now seem obvious. Cuban Americans have been reunited with their families and are the best possible ambassadors for our values. And through these exchanges, a younger generation of Cuban Americans has increasingly questioned an approach that does more to keep Cuba closed off from an interconnected world.
Okay, so we're back. The Oleg Moskalinsky, you were born in
Not in Cuba.
not in
And
Cuba.
I
You were
was
born
born, you're
in the
right, I was
Ukraine, right?
Yes.
Under the Soviet Union, and you left as a teenager, right? About 14 years old or something?
15. Yeah, 15.
15? So I see, this is interesting because I see behind you your 2 delightful children, and this is a generation gap issue. I think the overall, it's like 66% of Cuban Americans supported a reopening of relations. Among younger, under 29, I think it's 81 or 88% was the poll number I saw, support this. Among older Cuban Americans, it's at 41%. So the memory, and you have to put this in perspective, when Castro took over, he was initially supported by a lot of Americans and I think the U.S. government. Then he announced he was a communist. Then he nationalized a lot of U.S. companies and didn't reimburse them. Even in Venezuela, they, when they take over a factory or something and nationalize it, when Hugo Chavez did, he would reimburse the company some amount of money for taking it. But Cuba did not. So what are your thoughts on this? It's been 50 years, and President Obama's central point was if you've tried something for half of a century and it has not worked, it's time to try something different. What do you think?
Well, first of all, it has worked. I mean, I disagree with Obama, but Cuba is basically a joke in terms of economy and everything else, just like any Soviet-style, country would be, and partially because of U.S., closing the doors to them. But basically, to me, I look at it. I mean, I can understand why Cuba would be completely and totally for this. I mean, it's the same thing. There was a lot of anti-American propaganda in Russia when I lived there, but at the same time, people were totally for Americans and relationship with Americans, all of that, because they understand this is BS. And same thing with Cubans. I mean, essentially, it's the same kind of people that you're looking at. So from the Cuban standpoint, yes. From the American standpoint, what do we get this way? I mean, what do we get from having this relationship normalization? Maybe if Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel were alive, yeah, they probably look into, reestablishing the casinos and all that kind of stuff, going back to the, Corleone days. But seriously, though, what is America going to get out of normalizing relationship with Cuba? Not much, in my view. Not much at all. Cuba is going to gain all kinds of things, but America is not going to get much of anything. Cuba is not a threat, number one. Cuba does not produce anything that we necessarily need or cannot get anywhere else. And, Afro-Cuban jazz, I love that. But other than that, I mean, there's really nothing that they're going to be able to give us with this normalization, although I do think it's going to be positive for the population, Cuban population in Florida, because, you got all the relatives and everything else, so at least now you're able to travel easily and things like that. So I think from Cuban perspective, it's a huge boost. From American perspective, I think it's a almost non-event.
Okay, I'm going to go to Kevin in just 1 second. Let me ask you one quick question,
Okay.
Oleg, quick 30-second answer. The argument is we already have an embassy there, although it's not in use. But we do have a diplomatic mission there of sorts. It's just not called an ambassador and embassy.
Right.
The argument for this is that you're going to have disputes, but if you have a relationship where people are talking, that you can address those things, and that U.S. citizens traveling there, the more Cubans interact with Americans, the more likely it is that will foment democracy there. Do you think there's anything to that, or is that just pie in the sky?
I think it's number one. I think it is pie in the sky. Number one. Number two. So even if they did understand what's what, again, what does America gain from this thing? And in my view, not much. And then if you look at the people themselves, if the people in Cuba are anything like the people in the old Soviet Union, give them democracy, it's not going to change a thing. Look how screwed up the Russians are. Even though they got democracy for a while, were they able to do anything with it? Look at all these different places in the world where socialist countries were tried to be turned into democracies. They don't know how to handle democracy, and I think Cuba would be the same deal.
Can I ask you two 5-second questions? I know you got to go.
Yes.
You're from a former Soviet Union, so you grew up under communism, and now you love and embrace democracy as only a former, someone who was really a victim and a resident under communism could. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being meh, 10 being oh my effing God, what was your reaction to this announcement? And then I have one more question after that.
My reaction is exactly what I said. I mean, I don't think it's a big deal from our perspective, and that's the only perspective I care about.
As far as were you surprised?
I would be surprised if it wasn't Obama, but if it's Obama, I'm not surprised. That's what it is.
And final question for you. I know you got to go, and I appreciate your diligence. Is it fair to ask this question? If you're for not doing this with Cuba, isn't it fair to say that should we establish a trade embargo and remove diplomatic relations with China, because they're both communist countries, but we can't really afford to do that with China, right? So because this is cheap and easy, we can keep this going, but with China, everything in Walmart's made in China, so we can't afford to do that, so we're going to pick and choose where we're going to take a stand. Is that a fair question?
It's one of these deals where you have to look at it from a perspective of U.S. What does U.S. gain or what does U.S. lose by doing this to China or any other country? We have a lot of investments from China in the States. We have a lot of goods we buy from China. So it's a totally different situation with them in terms of American interests. And so to me, that's how it should be looked at. We're in America. It's America. We should look at it from a standpoint of American interests, and then based on that make a decision whether to do something with the country. And you could kind of potentially say the same thing about Russia, but at the same time, it's not that simple. With Cuba, it's simple. With Russia and China, it's not that simple. So that's what I would say. I mean, it has to be a positive thing for America to make sense to do something or not do something.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Oleg. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy holidays, everybody. I'm sorry I got to run, but Merry Christmas.
And you have to go feed some orphans or something, and so it's an important thing you have to roll out.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so Kevin Bryan, expand on this, and just tell me, what are your thoughts? This was huge. To paraphrase Joe Biden, this was a big freaking deal. This is massive. So tell me what you think. And Michael, if you could mute your mic while Kevin, because I'm getting a
it's paraphrased
back from you. Kevin, what do you think about this?
In terms of surprise, 1 to 10, I would say about a 9. I was extremely shocked that this was happening because it really came out of left field for me. I didn't see any lead up for it. But that also leads into my biggest issue.
Was that a pun, left field?
I had to throw a baseball term in there because it's Cuba. I had to. It was interesting in terms of surprise, but politically it was almost nonsensical because there was no explanation as to.
Oh God! Oh my God! I meant to hit. Okay, hang on.
Uh-oh.
Do I want to take me there? You're already in a video call. Take me there or end the other call. What do I want to do? I meant to hit decline or not answer. I got a call and it popped up. I don't know how to do this. Oh my God. This is embarrassing. I'm the host of a tech show and I'm trying to figure out.
You need to take me there because that's the existing call.
Cut the blue wire. That's
Okay.
what you should do. Don't cut the red.
Oh my
cut
God.
the blue.
Professor Vulcan, would you like to play a game? All right, so we're going to go here to click OK to return to the current video call. OK.
That
So I'm
sounds like
following
a good choice.
instructions. All right, so there we go. Go ahead. I apologize, Kevin. I have no idea what you were saying, but Duke, you're in charge after this. I'll be right back. Kevin, go ahead and go. And as they say on TV, for the weatherman, go long. Go ahead.
Okay, in terms of surprise,
Oh
1
my
out of
God.
10, I would say it's about a 9. I was extremely shocked to hear this. But part of the reason I was shocked is also part of the reason why politically I feel it's almost a nonsensical presentation of this decision. I have no problem with this decision in and of itself. Establishing normal diplomatic relationships with Cuba, I think, is a great thing because it's always good to talk with people, even if they seem to be your enemy. Because even if they seem to be your enemy, then sometimes if you have an open line of communication, you can get information that might lead to something in front of the scenes that might help lead you to some peace in the future. So in that sense, I have no problem with us reestablishing diplomatic relationships with Cuba. But politically, it feels really weird because first of all, there was no lead up. Yesterday or the day before, there was nothing going on, and then today we're completely embracing Cuba as our, BFF, and everything's cool now, apparently. But the problem I have is that there was no explanation for that was the first problem. The second problem is that there's really no good explanation from Obama as to what his goals are. And what I mean is that what is he trying to get out of this? If he was trying to get a good deal out of Cuba and for them to change their behavior, then that was a terrible deal. But he needs to explain that, why he would do that, even though it was a terrible deal for them. And also, if he's just doing it just because he feels it's the right thing to do, then he also, I don't think, adequately explained that to the public in a way that would be supportive.
I don't think I don't think there were no hints. Remember when Beyonce and Jay-Z went there, right? And there was a big thing. And also, how did they get to go to Havana? And Fox News, of course, was in hysterics. And then in the spring, there was the handshake, which was discussed between Raul Castro and President Obama. So
But that's weak. That's not real. And I mean, we've had an embargo for 50 years, and then we're having Mr. and Mrs. Surfboard show up in Cuba, and then all of a sudden that's supposed to show that we're supposed to embrace them. I need a real answer from a real politician. I mean, that's like talking about Bobby and Whitney going and talking to Ariel Sharon because they're black Israelites, and they get a photo op with him, and so that's supposed to show about impending changing relationships with Israel. That's not real. I need to hear something from him. I need to hear something about what changed.
I think you heard it, and this was actually predicted. I saw a Twitter exchange someone highlighted between Chuck Todd, who's now he's the former White House correspondent. Now he's in charge of Meet the Press, and he predicted that this would happen in December 2014, a year ago. He said that President Obama would have to wait until after the midterms because talk about an issue that could be demagogue, right? And he said that December 2014 would be a good time and to do this. And I remember I covered then Senator Obama, and I remember when he was running for president in 2008, and I remember him saying, if we will extend our hand if you unclench your fist, which I thought was one of the best political lines I've ever heard before. And he was referring to, let's rethink our relationships with some of these regimes, and if cutting them off hasn't worked for 50 years, maybe this will work.
And that's worked really well with Putin.
Well, well.
Let's go to go ahead, Kevin, and then we'll go to Duke.
Yeah, final thing. Just because something is said doesn't mean it's communicated to the country at large. It may have been said, but I don't think most people got the message. And so the best place to get that message across would have been in that speech, and also follow-up speeches where he should have addressed where he was going to talk about it next, who else was going to talk about it next, and why this is happening. Because as of right now, I'm glad we're opening up diplomatic relationships. I don't know what that's going to mean for Congress in terms of changing any relationships there. I don't know what that means politically also for the Democrats, because Republicans are going to jump all over this and say that he just rolled over on this deal, and so why would you want to support that party? I mean, it's an issue for his fellow Democrats just as much as it is for the country at large, because he may have put some campaigns in jeopardy by doing this without explanation. That's all I'm saying.
He's Duke. He's clearly thinking about legacy here, and he waited until the last. He said this is the fourth quarter of his presidency. It is, and sometimes stuff happens in the fourth quarter, but this is a big deal. My entire life, Cuba was this, boogeyman, etc. We're the only country that has an embargo against Cuba. The other countries criticize it. We weren't really able to engage in the OAS meeting every year, and now it will be. And I go to what the president said, which is he was sort of quoting that popular meme definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, is the definition of insanity. For 50 years we've tried this, and it's not worked. So let's try something different, and maybe by engaging we can affect change. What are your thoughts, Duke?
Okay, first of all, from 1 to 10, how would I rate this as a news story? Probably a 9.5. I agree with, I agree with a whole lot of what Oleg and Kevin said. But I'd like to kind of set this up and frame it another way. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, I am ultra conservative, okay? I like to joke that I quit the Tea Party because those guys were too liberal for me, okay? The truth is Obama blew me away with this. He's totally got my support on this, all right? I know it's not popular with a lot of Republicans. I know it's not, like Kevin laid out, he might be making it hard on a lot of Democrats. But he said something that I found, my entire life, I have seen embargoes on Cuba. Cuba was the evil, all the human rights issues, okay? What we're doing is not working. But the question that I do have going forward, and I think this is a very big question, okay? Relations are going to get better. Trade's going to start happening. We're going to have baseball again in Cuba. People are going to be traveling to Cuba, talking to a friend today who's already planning his trip to Havana, okay? What's going to happen, though, when these human rights violations don't improve? It's still this Castro-run regime. I mean, are we going to reapply sanctions? I think that's what's got me concerned going forward. I'm all for opening up dialogue and let's try and be friends again. But if it doesn't work out, that's kind of what's got me concerned. Alan, what's your thoughts? I'm sorry. Michael.
Jody.
Am I the other Michael?
Well, I'll tell you what. Go ahead, Jody. Go for it.
Oh, I thought I was waiting for Mike to jump in. Go ahead, Michael.
I have a bad lag, Jody, so I go last.
Go ahead.
So what do you think, Jody? Do you have any thoughts on Cuba and the announcement there? How would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Um, I don't really have a whole lot about Cuba. I'm not. Let me put it this way: I'm not necessarily a fan of our overseas policy. But I'd like to address the movie and what happened with the hacking, and I'm also going to apologize because my dogs are like messing around in the background. So if you hear noise bleeding in, it's the dogs. I'm kind of surprised that we capitulated and pulled the movie so quickly. I understand that there's a threat and a concern for people going to the movie theaters, but I guess the best way to combat it isn't to pull the movie, but instead to release it, like this is just my opinion, to everyone, and then just charge for advertising. You'll make back the revenue, and you'll get it out to more people. And I gotta tell these dogs to be quiet. So I'm still here, but I'm gonna mute for a sec.
Her dogs speak English, so that's pretty cool. That's a very impressive thing there. So I would ask Jody.
That's right.
The biggest reservation that these folks have is it worth the risk? And will there be retaliation? Do they want the hassle? Because this really isn't Landmark or Cinemark's fight. This is Sony's fight against. But in another sense, as all of us have said, this is about the First Amendment. And so it is all a fight for all of us. But I remember when they were first discussing rebuilding the World Trade Center, and George Will on This Week said who would insure it and who would be the insurers and who would be the occupants. So I ask you on your advertising question, what major company would be willing to advertise on this movie, knowing that they may face another thing like this? And on the technical side, how do you defend yourself? I mean, we are not there yet. We don't have we haven't figured out how to prevent these hacking attacks. I mean, Home Depot, Target have famously been hacked, and now they've hacked Sony. We have not licked this yet, and so at this point, we're in between. We recognize there's a huge problem because we've seen story after story about these hacks, but we're in between that point and we figured out how to deal with it. So who would advertise it? And they have $44 million invested in this, in the movie, and I assume some of the deals are they have to charge. They can't just release it for free because I assume Seth Rogen gets percentage of the back end or the front end or what have you, that sort of thing. So they're kind of like in this awkward position. They've got this investment here, but really it's a larger issue than purely monetary. So, and they've said, Sony has said that they would, in fact, release it on demand if they can get, a Netflix or a Hulu or an Amazon Prime to do it. But who would advertise on this? And if it was your company, are you prepared? For example, if you had a dog breeding company or a dog kennel or whatever, would you be in a position to advertise on this? And what kind of consequences would you face?
Okay, all good points, Dan. And I'm sorry, I'm like wrestling dogs back here.
It's okay.
But I think you raised some very, very valid points. And the first question is, who would advertise? And I guess my response to that is, whoever does advertise, if it's a cereal company or if it's toilet paper, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be the first one in line to buy it because they're supporting freedom of speech and they're supporting the American way, and there's safety in numbers. So the more sponsors you have, you flood the market with sponsors. You have enough sponsors, they can't possibly go after everyone. And frankly, as a nation, we have to do a better job of improving our cybersecurity. We're not good at it. I gotta grab these guys.
Her dogs are larger than she is, just to put this in perspective. So this is a battle, second only to the North Korea situation. So, Michael Ellis, do you think there will be a backlash, for lack of a better term, where some theater chains may choose to actually go ahead and show this after what the president said, followed up by what the Sony CEO said. And do you think we may actually see this in theaters with some sort of, placard on a pedestal saying, by the way, there may be an explosion,
For
and
individual
Americans
risk?
may show up in droves? Or do you think that it's dead and it will end up in a red box or some sort of video on demand platform that we haven't even heard of yet?
Yeah, I don't think you'll see it in theaters if Sony doesn't officially release it to theaters. The theaters would be constrained from playing it. They wouldn't, because, well, first off, they wouldn't get the film if Sony doesn't release it. The theater doesn't get the film. So I don't think it will show up in theaters unless Sony says it can. So
Okay.
I,
All right.
I just
Go ahead,
reiterate
Duke.
something that I said earlier. I still I'm not convinced that if North Korea is behind this hack, I'm not convinced that North Korea has the ability to attack American theaters. Okay, this is not some religious Taliban or ISIS that has sympathizers all around the world. This is North Korea. Nobody sympathizes with North Koreans unless they live in North Korea and they have to.
Okay, so let me go to some comments. Sai says, I've been to the DMZ. There are plenty of countermeasures on both sides. North Korea only exists today because China allows it, and they've been slowly shifting for the last decade. I agree that as our relations thaw with Cuba, China has been clearly a bit more put off in their relationship with North Korea. And on the other hacking attempt that I alluded to earlier, Sai says there was also a pipeline in Turkey that preceded Stuxnet that was hacked and exploded. There are several examples of this where there actually is physical damage due to a hack. He says it's not like the North Korean news would report any cyber attacks. True. Jody commented before she joined us, I agree with Sai, except I think they should release the movie free to everybody and then present it with advertising. They would make the money and may lose at the box office and yet get even more distribution and mass views. Clearly everyone wants to see this movie now. It's definitely a exhibit 101 for the Streisand effect. George Cozy in the Netherlands says if you are not talking to people, you can't fix things. It might take decades of arguing, ups and downs, but there must be dialogue. So, and also the real answer as to why is it was time. Perhaps a better answer would be it's the second term, it's after the midterms, so President Obama has had his last election. He has nothing to gain or lose after this except speaking fees on the lecture circuit. So maybe just like Nixon, it's interesting because you had Nixon wasn't a right-wing Republican. He was actually a moderate Republican by today's standards, but he was able to open the door to China, and Obama has opened the door to Cuba, and we'll see what happens. And I'm optimistic. I hope so badly that good things will come from this. Sai says, it just blew beer up my nose. I need a real answer from a real politician. And Gary Levin says 50 years later, most Cubans in the U.S. are older or have passed away. Rightly, 2 generations have passed, and most of the quote-unquote victims of the Cuban Missile Crisis have passed. The U.S. failed or purposely did not support the invasion force of Cubans, Bay of Pigs, true, in an attempt to overthrow the Castro regime. The U.S. not so clandestinely supported the invasion. They overtly supported the invasion. There are related businesses out there banking issues of trade with Cuba. This is only the first step of normalizing Cuba-U.S. relationships. There are clearly some legislative, legal, and political issues to settle. That's true, and this is a bipartisan issue. There are opponents and proponents on both sides of the political aisle. There are Republicans and Democrats who support and oppose, and in both cases strongly, or in some cases strongly, whether we should do this. Overall, it's a good step. My most important issue is, will I be able to get Cuban cigars? Cuba has a lot to offer: cigars, rum, and tourism. That is, of course, the consummate question. So there's that. Any final thoughts on this before we go to our actual tech topic? Okay. All right, so we'll see what happens. This is the Cuban thing is something we won't know the answer to this debate for many years. We'll find out, in 10, 20 years, we'll be able to look back, and then we'll be able to know if this was a good move or a bad move. But I think, as Duke said, there's some logic in the president's argument that if you've tried something for 50 years and it hasn't worked, maybe you should try something different. And I think that's the gist of this. So next up, followed by dog bark.
I know, right? Sorry.
Oh, it's awesome. I love it. So next up is this Mississippi Attorney General, and Google has, I guess, filed a lawsuit against this thing. I know that, Duke, you're all on this story, so why don't you give us sort of a synopsis here and what your initial view is?
I'll tell you what, Dan, I have been following this a little bit, and rather than just running through it, I'm just going to get to the bottom line. If, let's just pretend for a minute that Attorney General Jim Hood got enough support from America and he shut down Google, okay? I promise you, tomorrow, people that are looking for pirated movies, if they're looking for a Viagra and other drugs on the internet, they're going to find them on Yahoo and Bing. Okay, I think that Google is the wrong corporation to be going after here, and that's just my take on the whole thing. I think listen, this guy is definitely in the Sony and other people's hip pocket, and I'm not too fond of Jim Hood as I've been watching this going forward. I think his actions are all misguided.
I would agree. It's what this is about is he subpoenaed a bunch of stuff, and Google's arguing that this is only after, and his goal officially and publicly is to, he's been a longtime critic of Google in that you can find pirated things and that sort of thing. Google is a town square. It's where it's a dictionary where you can look up stuff and find results. And so a lot of entities, for various reasons, are trying to suppress certain information. And you can make an argument that if something is posted illegally, that they should be able to do a takedown. And Google does, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Duke, but I think they do they honor millions of takedown requests a day, or a month, or whatever the stat is. I'm not sure. So if something is if you had like to use our previous topic, this movie, The Interview, if Pirate Bay were hosting that movie to watch, then if Sony put in a copyright claim, a takedown order, then Google honors that right away. But
according to Ars Technica, Dan, last year the company disapproved, I'm talking about Google here, of more than 428 million ads and terminated more than 900,000 AdWords from advertisers. That was Google's effort to combat this.
So there you go. Any other thoughts on this? Jody first, if you have any.
Sure, yeah. So it's a tough road, okay? On one hand, you want a search engine to be able to index everything that it can without censorship, without somebody asking for things to be taken down. On the other hand, you have situations where there's like maybe someone is harassing somebody else. There should be some methodology that if something is patently illegal or false or libelous, or you know what I mean, if it's a problem, that there should be some mechanism in place to protest it and have it taken down. I know, was it chilling effects that does that? Like if you have something that impinges on copyright, you can submit it and it can be taken down. And I guess to the extent that it's being perhaps patrolled and evaluated by the masses, I mean, that's the way the search engines have kind of evolved, where we are the consumers of content, but we're also offering suggestions and editing, just like a Wikipedia where people go in and they make edits and changes. I don't know that I'm a advocate of government getting involved in this process, but I do believe that when there's a situation where something has been done that's hurtful or bullying or harassing, and patently so, there should be a mechanism that somebody has to be able to protest it. You know, and as far as getting all of the searches and then probably suppressing information that way, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think you talk about freedom of speech, they're not curating the information, they're merely indexing it. I mean, Google is. At least that's my impression. That's my 2 cents. Michael?
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to what you guys have said. I think I'm probably in pretty straight up agreement with Duke on this. It feels a lot to me like the Attorney General's got some political agenda that is funding some future gubernatorial campaign, but hard to know for sure. But it doesn't make sense to me, and I certainly don't think the public at large will be in favor of this.
I do like that Google is standing up and saying, they're going to fight for the integrity of search results in general. And that's exactly why we like Google. That's exactly what we expect and want. If I type something in, I want to know what are the most relevant search results. And their whole claim to fame is that the search result that has the most sites that are considered legitimate linking to that result elevate that search result in the rankings. That's their claim to fame. It always has been. They just want to present the truth. If you type in Charles Manson in the European Union, I don't want to see
it
that
seems like
he was a
France and
musician.
Germany have moved to Mississippi.
Exactly. So if I type in Charles Manson and I want to know, oh wow, he was part of a gang that murdered people, I don't want to know that he was a musician because something's been stripped because it's negative toward him. So God help us if we go the way of the EU. Michael, let's start with you here and tell me anything else you want to add on any of the topics we've discussed tonight, and tell me how your week went and how the Airbnb thing is going. I understand they've had a revamp of their app, and you're a popular destination. So go ahead and tell us what's going on in New York, and have you had any co-eds visiting your humble abode?
I am not in New York at the moment. I'm in Indiana. But I did have, for the very first time, I did have Airbnb guests in my place this week while I've been in Indiana. I came to Indiana because, well, I came to Illinois and to Indiana because a friend of mine is quite ill. I went to stay with her during her chemotherapy treatments. And then my father had a stroke, so I'm staying with him to get until he's home from rehab, which comes home on Tuesday. So it's all good news in the end, but it's been a tough month. So my Airbnb guests were beautiful co-eds, I'm told by my neighbor. They are two very pretty blonde 20-year-old girls from Australia. And my gay neighbor told me so that I would feel bad about not being there. And so my Google Plus week has been tough but good. And I've done absolutely nothing on Google Plus for more than a week.
And obviously, our thoughts go out to your father. That's awful. I didn't know that. Is he gonna be okay? What's the status?
Thank you. Yeah, he's going to be fine. I mean, he's going to be fine and 90. So he's still going to be 90 when we get done, which is never an easy age to be, but he's doing good. Thank you.
Good for him. All right, Jody, how was your? Any final thoughts on anything we've discussed, and how was your Google Plus week?
Yeah, I do have another thought about Google and the content indexing. It's interesting. I mean, to the extent that Google does a really good job with evaluating content, we're happy with it. EdgeRank, just to compare, that's the Facebook search, I guess you'd call it, or indexing. I'm less than happy with. I know that Google has made a lot of changes. They're always constantly updating, and panda, penguin. I mean, I don't know what animal it is this week, but there have been a lot of changes. I think to some extent it's helped, to some extent it's hurt, but it's always a learning experience. And I applaud the fact that they attempt to continue to improve to be a really good index and not to be an editor. And that's a differentiation in my book. Regarding the last week, I just got back. I was on a road trip. Got an old RV, and a female friend of mine and myself took our dogs down to Orlando. We were at the Eukanuba National Dog Show. Jewel got no love, but we had a blast. And we have now qualified for Westminster, so she'll be showing at the Westminster Dog Show. So this new little thing that we're doing with dogs and dog handling has been a real hoot. So it was a good Google Plus week.
That's awesome. I'm going to do mine, and then we're going to go to Duke. My week was great. I had a conference call with, we can't say who, even though you know all the voices, but it was senior White House officials about the Cuban thing, and it was about 2 hours. It was at 10 a.m. or so, a couple hours before the joint press conferences between with Presidents Obama and President Castro in Cuba. So it was a wow moment for me. I've covered all kinds of stuff. I've seen Princess Diana. I've seen Prince Charles. I've seen Ronald Reagan in person. I've shaken hands with George H.W. Bush, 41, twice. I've covered a lot of stuff. I've seen all kinds of stuff, and this really was a whoa moment for me. So hearing them say, we're going to do this, I'm hopefully, I'm optimistic about that. It will result in a dialogue that leads to positive change, leads to interaction. Now, the embargo is not gone, right? That's an act of Congress. That's the Helms-Burton Act of I think, 96, 97. The embargo, or the latest incarnation of that, is from that year, but the embargo dates back 50 years. But I'm very optimistic about it, and I'm hopeful that more interaction will yield positive results. I think all of us are hopeful of that, regardless of where you stand on whether this was a good move or not. So it's really interesting. It's kind of like, how do you like your lame duck president now? Because he's really he's doing some provocative things, and we'll see. History will be the judge. We're kind of arguing, as I said earlier. I think we're kind of arguing over a definition that's in the dictionary, and because we don't have a dictionary handy, so it doesn't make any sense when you can just wait till the dictionary definition comes out. But that's what we do. We argue. So we're going to find out in the next 10 years or so whether this made any impact, and even longer than that. But also, I got to print the paper early because of Christmas. So we're going to do that Monday at I think I got to turn the paper in at 8 p.m. So it's going to be cracking the whip on my staff. So I'll be busy all weekend and nervous about getting that done. But I think we may do a show next week if I can rustle up some folks. And I really want to thank Jody and Michael and Duke and who else was here? Oleg and Kevin for showing up tonight. I appreciate it, because Alan had a thing, he couldn't do it, and Pam had a office thing, and Cadeas is traveling, so they couldn't show up. So I really appreciate these guys coming in, guys and gals coming in and help me out. But this ends, this is the second to last, or last, but probably second to last show of 2014. I think I started this in 2011, so I want to thank you guys, the viewers, and I'll go back to the comments right before after Duke's done. But thank you so much.
This is like Stephen Colbert's next to the last show.
Except I don't have my friend Henry Kissinger on the program. Although I do have a picture with Henry Kissinger, which I posted before, with me and my dad and Henry Kissinger when we were seeing
exactly.
the
Henry Kissinger didn't make an appearance.
Exactly. So I'm basically a loser compared to Stephen Colbert. What's the headline? It was "Death to Stephen Colbert, Long Live Stephen Colbert." But anyway, so that's that. Thank you all very much for commenting throughout the year. I really appreciate it, and we love it. That's why we do this. None of us make any money. I mean, I think I monetize the show, but then I spend more advertising it than I get. So it's a money and time sucking hole. But we do this for fun. So let me go to. I'm gonna get the comments ready, and then Duke, any final thoughts you have on anything we discussed, and how was your week, sir?
Yeah, well, first of all, to Jody's point about copyright, YouTube, Google's got some, man, that algorithm's got to be scary, because I can, I can do an Android journal show, Dan, and maybe within that Android journal show, I can show like a YouTube video of a Samsung commercial and have my video taken down within 20 minutes after it goes up because of some sort of copyright infringement, okay? So, I think Google actually probably could do some mean filtering just based upon what we see in YouTube, but I'm not real sure that that's where, that we want Google to do that. And I agree with what you said. I think that's why a lot of people, like ourselves that like Google, appreciate what Google can do for us within search. Hey, I've had a great week. I had rooted my phone and kind of lost root when they pushed out the 501 update. And I ended up going back to factory and upgraded to 501, got it rooted back, and I've wasted about a half a day today on that. So, but it's been a great week, man.
That's awesome. And tell for folks who want to watch Android Journal, what's the best way to do that? When is it? And also tell us about Tech and Coffee.
Well, Tech and Coffee is a Google Plus Hangout that happened in the early days of Hangouts. We kind of build a community. We do hurls both in the States and in Europe. We're all great friends. There's probably 14 or 15 guys. I talk to them every day. I don't even talk to my mother every day, but I talk to the guys at Tech and Coffee, okay? So, it's a great group. And out of that, we just started a podcast called Android Journal. It happens each Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, and we just get together and talk about the Android news of the week. And I've got a panel who offers their opinions. We don't always agree, and man, that when we don't, that's when it really gets fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Also check out Brad Brad's Tech Webcast at techwebcast.info. It's an awesome show, and I was recently on it, but watch it or listen to it anyway. And we want to thank you for watching. And last comments here. Let's go to what is this? 8SL2K1. Treaties are nothing but fancy toilet paper. They're only followed when it suits the signatories. If we're going to war, it should be for a better movie than this one, said Edward. Yeah, I've heard some slightly less than positive reviews of the movie. I've not seen it, but I'm guessing, Seth Rogen movie, it's going to be kind of like a stoner movie, right? And let me find the comments here. All right, I guess we're good. I missed it. All right, so thank you all very much. It's been wonderful having you watch and listen, or whatever you do. This program is called Google Plus Week. We're every Friday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific on Google Plus and YouTube Live. We also have another program, Our Android Week, which is every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on Monday nights. Also, again, tomorrow I will be on the Virginia Talk Radio Network at 10:50 p.m. or a.m., 10:50 a.m. and 11:07 a.m. after CBS News. I'll be discussing basically what I talked about tonight, Sony and Cuba. Excuse me. I stand corrected. But hope you can listen to that. If you want to, it's virginiatalkradionetwork.com or wiqoradio.com or any of the other stations' websites. Thank you all very much for watching. I really appreciate it. It's always a blast, and thank you so much to our panel once again. And we will see you next time. Until then, have a wonderful Google Plus week.